Well, here we go. We are going to be tasting wines from Deutschland, from Germany. And I must confess my love affair with these wines and this region for many, many reasons. And so I'm personally happy to be able to share them with you. Just on a little aside, I participated in a virtual tasting with the winemaker from Alsace, France this morning. Well, actually at noon. It must have been 9 p.m. in Alsace where he was, and it was a noon tasting for the Los Angeles sommelier community. And since Alsace sits just across the Rhine River from Germany, the region of Alsace, France, is heavily affected by German culture. And so I say that Alsace, France is as Germanic as it is French. And so it's a perfect segue for me personally today to be going from those wines to these wines here with you. And so there you go. I want to show you, how I like to start with my Google Earth map. And so here we go. Die Weine Deutschlands. Yeah, we're drinking or tasting the wines of Germany. And if you get this perspective here of Europe, and there we see the far northern Europe, that Moosehead of Norway and Sweden taking a bite out of Denmark that is growing out of the top of Germany. You see that Germany is right there in the center. And now to give you a little more perspective, we'll go to the next slide, which shows us, again, I know I'm a broken record on this, grape growing occurs between 30 and 50 degrees latitude. And if you can look closely at this map here, you'll see that Germany sits between 48 and actually, I don't know what that top, and 54. Yeah, so Germany sits between 48 and 54 degrees latitude. And so it really stretches the envelope of potential grape growing. In fact, the southern half of Germany is really where the bulk of the grapes are growing, and that's really between 48 and 51. So really, we're just starting to stretch that grape growing region. And the significance is as we're moving north, we're getting colder. And so, grapes need a certain amount of days to grow and ripen, the vines do, and a certain amount of heat. And so Germany is able to do this, but only under special, with sort of special ingredients mixed into the vineyards. The next slide will help me make my point. Although we're not tasting from this particular Mosel vineyard, the Velener Sonnenner, this is the sundial vineyard found in the village of Velen. And you can see the sundial there towards the top of the vineyard. And what we're looking at is a vineyard. Well, if you've got your back to the sundial, you are facing the south. And so having a southern exposure means that you're getting the full day's sun shining on the grapes. So that's number one. Only these southeast, southwest facing vineyards that get more of the daytime sunlight. That sunlight creates heat. That heat enables the grapes to produce sugar, and then we can get, lots of flavor and the proper amount of alcohol in the wine. Another aspect of this, and what you can't see in this vineyard, in this picture, but you'll see in other slides, is that we're sitting facing down towards the Mosel River. So when you're facing south and you're on the north bank of the river, we're going to get reflected light off of the river up into the vineyard, which is going to increase the light, the heat, and more sugar growing potential. And these vineyards, the soils, we'll say soils, it's a lot of decomposed slate. And that slate absorbs the heat of the sun and helps keep the soil and the roots warm. So at the end of the day, the vines are able to process those last bits of sugar that the vines have produced. And as well, the slate is also reflecting light up into the canopy of the vine. And so with all of this, quite honestly, I'm talking about a cool growing region. Once the sun goes down, the temperature is going to drop precipitously. So it can get up to 85, maybe on a hot summer day, 90 degrees temperature, but at night it's going to drop down to 50 or 60 degrees. So that cool at the end of the day is going to help the grapes preserve their acidity. And, that's another broken record for me. We need acid in our wines. So this vineyard is a good example of what is needed to ripen grapes in Germany. Our next slide just gives us a better visual of where the vineyards are found by and large. And so on this map, where Dresden is, that's pretty much 51 degrees latitude, and you'll see just a couple of areas around Dresden and just up to the slightly north and west of there, where that's the part of Germany that was reunified, and those vineyards have added on two more potential grape growing areas. The region of, at the top of that map there, you see it says Saale Unstrut and Sachs. I think it's missing a letter there because it's Sachsen, Saxony and Saale Unstrut, which were added to the German wine regions with reunification. Saale Unstrut really is just the Saale and Unstrut rivers that demarcate that area. The rest of the areas of grape growing you can see are clustered there in the south. And we're going to be tasting from three of those regions. The next slide will focus on just that southern section. And so you'll see that the very first wine that we're going to taste comes from that area in the upper left where it says Mosel, Saar, and Ruwer. And today we just refer to it as the Mosel Valley. Saar and Ruwer are, again, tributary rivers to the Mosel, and the Mosel itself is a tributary to the Rhine, which is the main artery that goes through Germany. So we start with a Mosel Riesling, and then the wine, and that's how I have them set up, by the way. I've got this left bottle is our Mosel Riesling. And then we're going to go to the upper right of this map here to the region of Franken. Of course, Frankfurt is what helps to give this area its name. But you see right in the middle, straight down from Franken, it says Würzburg. And that's the village where this middle wine comes from, the Stein Vineyard in Würzburg. And then we're going to go to right between those, that little kind of purplish bluish area, that little part that's sitting right there on the Rhine called the Rheingau. And the Rheingau is a very important wine growing region in Germany, as is the Mosel Valley. And some very perhaps the most famous vineyard in all of Germany is found here in the Rheingau. And we're going to be tasting a wine that you see how this area is where the Rhine River is flowing from east to west. And then at the end there, it curves to the north. And right there on the northern curve, we're going to be tasting this Spätburgunder that's found in the village of Osmundshausen. And Spätburgunder, also known as Blauburgunder, has its two relatives, Grauburgunder und Weißburgunder. Oh, my Burgunders! We're talking about Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Blanc. Spätburgunder is the Pinot Noir grape, which is actually the most planted grape, black grape in Germany. The most planted grape in Germany is Riesling. It is the noble grape of Germany. And in my not so humble opinion, I am an opinionated, you can fill in the rest of that. I think that Riesling is probably the most versatile wine with food. Riesling wines go with the full array of foods, and we'll talk about that later. And so let's come back to me a second. Let's put our noses, shall we? I know you're already deep in your cups, but it's okay. You're home. You're jumping ahead of me, but I can live with it. So number one is this Riesling from the village of Grock that sits. We'll go back to the map, so you'll see where Grock sits, and an important village for Riesling, and has some very notable vineyards there. Germany is kind of taken on the framework that Burgundy, France uses with their wines from a commune, wines from some of the better vineyards that produce better grapes, and then the best vineyards that have the potential for growing the best grapes, the Grand Cru. So Germany has taken on that structure for identifying their wines. Let's stick a nose here in this Riesling. I'm in love. Okay, so enough about me. What do you think about me? I get the sense, it's funny how they say you can't really smell acidity. And yet, when I put my nose in this glass and I'm getting citrus and green apples and maybe yellow peach, nectarine, and I already start to salivate just thinking and smelling that. Of course, there's another strong element to this wine, and I know many of you are going to say this guy's full of hooey, and I am full of hooey, to be honest with you, but I smell, and I swear by it, I smell, again, crushed stone, that the influence of the slate in this wine is undeniable. And, again, there's no slate dissolved in the wine. What is it that we're actually smelling? What we're smelling are the yeasts and bacteria that thrive in that slaty soil, and that gives its flavor to the wine, and therefore that flavor and aroma is part and parcel of the wine and gives us this impression of these very slaty soils. There's flowers here. There's kind of sweet florals of jasmine, a little spice to it. And I just can't resist it. Okay, I know you're already deep in, so Prost, or what was the Zum Wohl? I learned it. Right? You feel that acid. It's a dry wine. Oh, I brought the text sheet because, you know, I always forget stuff. And, this isn't really much of a text sheet. Okay, I take it back. Yeah, you know, I read through it and I was reading about the house, and we sent these all to you. But a real text sheet is going to give us pH, total acidity, and residual sugar, because this is what I would call a bone dry wine. And yet I know, just from my experience of tasting these wines, that they have left some unfermented sugars in this wine because the acid is so high. Remember what I said, during the daytime, it gets hot during the day from the sunlight, the reflected light, the slate in the soil that helps the grapes produce their sugars. But at night, when it cools down, the grapes, the acidity comes back up. And if this wine had been fermented bone dry, and by the way, and maybe it tells me on the back of the bottle. Nah, no such luck. This wine is 12% alcohol, right? If this wine was fermented bone dry, it would probably bring it up maybe a whole percentage more. Nah, probably not that much, because there can't be more than 9 grams of residual sugar. 9 grams of residual sugar or potential in this wine, and yet it comes off bone dry. My guess is that there's probably 5 or 6. But we can't taste any of that because the acid is so hot. And that acid, well, you know everything I say about that. Cuts through fat, helps our body digest. I love Riesling. So, you know, I love dry Riesling. I love off-dry, sweet, and dessert wine sweet. And there are applications with food for all of those. So 100 years ago, when I worked at Big Mike's restaurant, it's called Michael's Restaurant in Santa Monica on 3rd Street, Celebrity Mike. Michael used to do this salad called papaya avocado. He would fan a papaya, fan the avocado, a little, I think maybe Belgian endive and frise, and there would be Maine lobster out of the shell served on top of the papaya and the avocado. And when you took a bite of that, and especially if you got that sweet papaya, if you have a bone dry wine with that, the sugar of the papaya is going to accentuate the acidity and dryness of the wine, and the wine may come off bitter. So a wine that has just a little bit of noticeable residual sugar will equal the sweetness of the papaya, and that's what we want. We want sugar with sugar, acid with acid. And so an off-dry Riesling or an off-dry Chenin Blanc that I so love. We're going to do a Chenin Blanc from South Africa. but we may have to do a Chenin Blanc tasting because I love it. Yeah, sugar is required when you have sweetness in a dish. Or if you have fatty fish, I mean, what's classic Germanic fare is sausage, right? That can be fatty. And so the perception of fat comes off with a sweetness. So sweetness in a Riesling, residual sugar in a Riesling, can be good with those sausages. When you get up into sweeter but not dessert wine sweet, we may want to use that with something that has cheese. Certainly foie gras is classic with usually actually dessert wine, but a sweet Riesling Auslese is on the verge of dessert wine sweet, and we can use that with foie gras also. And then when we get to the sweet dessert wine, the botrytis dessert wines or the ice vines, those are wonderful again with foie, cheese, and sweet desserts. I love them with peach and apple, apple tarte tatin. One of my favorite desserts. Who's inviting me over for that? My friend Dorta, who used to be the pastry chef at Michael's restaurant, made the best tarte tatin. I love you, Dorta. Oh, she's not here with us, but anyway, I love her. I get so excited, my hands shake. I got to use two hands. Okay, let's look at my map again. Yeah, we meant to taste the others, but we're gonna, and you're already halfway through. You already filled up your glasses. So we're back to this map. And so here we are in the Mosel with this Riesling. And you see right in the middle of that map, it says Bernkastel Kues. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that, I'm getting dizzy just from looking. Look at how the Mosel swirls, and the Mosel flows from south to north, leading into the Rhine River. And every time it hits these mountains, the mountain makes the river curve, and it curves. And every time we get these curves, we're given these south-facing slopes that give us better perspective for the grapes to get that sunshine. And so there you see on this first curve, there's Bernkastel. And then just north of Bernkastel, there you see the red dot of Grock on der Mosel, which is where this wine comes from. We're going to get now another picture. We're going to close in on Grock in our next slide. And so we are facing north here, which means the hillside is facing southwest. And we're still getting lots of, that's the Mosel River right there that the village of Grock is sitting on. And our grapes are coming from that hillside there. This wonderful 12% alcohol. You know what I love about having a relatively low alcohol wine is that so I can drink a bottle of it by myself and still be able to negotiate. Yeah, right. Because a bottle of higher alcohol wine, I'm falling down. Happy, but falling down. Yeah, I know. Okay, so why don't we look at the next slide? We're going to be back at our map again because now we're going over to Franken, to the village of Würzburg. let's look. So now you have your perspectives right down of the word Frank, and you see the village of Würzburg. And our next slide will give us the coat of arms of the Julius Spittel winery. So 2 years ago, I was invited on a wine educator's trip to Germany. Wendy and I left a few days in advance of the school that I was going to be attending, and we visited some wineries, and we visited the Weingut Julius Spittel, which, if you can see at the bottom there, it's hard to see, but it says 1576 is when this winery was established. And the next slide will show you their cellars that just don't stop. It's rooms. It's this like what do they call it? A railroad. You know, a buddy of mine used to live in a railroad apartment in New York City. And so this is like a railroad cellar of rooms that lead into rooms. This is one barrel room in the cellar where fermentation occurs as well as aging. And then the next slide is the next room. And then you can see the next room, and there's another room down. I mean, it was like I was getting, you know, hey, slow down, I'm taking pictures, that I was yelling out to them. And you can see how the barrels are, the barrel heads get carved beautifully, ornately. The next slide shows just one of the barrels. Yeah, right. And the next slide will show you what I'm going to look like, or what I did look like after that tasting. There's barrels, yeah. I think I've got one more here. Do I not? Yeah. Okay, so now we're looking down on the village of Würzburg, and it's maybe a little more industrial. And on the lower left, we see the Main River, well, it's spelled like Maine, M-A-I-N, but it's pronounced Main. And the Main is yet another tributary to the Rhine, the Main and the Rhine, and we'll come back to that also. So we're looking right into that Würzburger Stein vineyard. The Stein vineyard is basically a Grand Cru vineyard for this area here. It's an Einzellage, a single vineyard. Now, there are some vineyards that were I'll say discovered, that were explored, and the boundaries of the vineyard were first demarcated by monks back in the 12th century. And some of those vineyards, they would build a stone wall around. A vineyard with a stone wall around in France would be called a clos, C-L-O-S. In Deutschland, it's an Ortsteil, is an enclosed vineyard with a wall around it. The Würzburger Stein is not an Ortsteil, it's just a single vineyard, acknowledged single vineyard. And because of Napoleonic law, Napoleon didn't dig the fact that the firstborn son inherited, and we can come back to me now. Napoleon didn't like it that the firstborn son inherited all of his father's property. So when he became the Emperor Napoleon, part of the Napoleonic law was that all of the siblings, men and women, equally, see how advanced he was? All of the siblings would get an equal piece of the rock. And so what that did was it parceled up the vineyards. So when we look at that Stein vineyard, that vineyard is owned by many different people, maybe a dozen different people. Honestly, I made that number up. It could be 20, it could be less, but these vineyards are owned by different families that have inherited through the years. There are the unique occasions when the family basically incorporates, so that holds the whole vineyard together. And so when Papa dies, rather than parceling it up, the siblings earn or inherit stock in the vineyard. And so these single-owned vineyards in France are referred to as monopoles, and in Deutschland they're called Alleinbesitz. And Alleinbesitz is a vineyard that is wholly owned by one family. The Riesling, the Reichsgraf von Kesselstadt family that made this Riesling for us, they in the village of Grock have the Josefshofer vineyard, which is their Alleinbesitz. They are the sole owner of the Josefshofer vineyard, and that's kind of special. And as I say, it's unique. So now we're putting our nose here in this Silvaner. It turns out that the soils in Franken, we're probably going to have some granite but also chalk Muschelkalk, which is limestone, and the Silvaner kind of thrives in these soils, and there's a uniqueness that the classic bottle is this Boxbeutel is the name of this bottle. Now, I know a lot of you look at this, were maybe surprised when you bought this and you're saying, what, he's selling me Matus Rosé, which is what, my first occasion of tasting a wine in a bottle like this was Matus Rosé. But this is actually a classic bottle found in the region of the Franken, and Silvaner is the most planted grape in this region. And now if you put your nose in the Silvaner and then go back to your Riesling, you'll see similarities. I'm getting much more of that mineral and perceived acidity out of the Riesling. The Silvaner comes off, it's a little sweeter on the nose, with peaches and maybe some melon, golden delicious apples. The florals aren't quite as spicy as the Riesling with jasmine. Maybe a little bit more towards a honeysuckle or peach blossom aroma. Still you can get that perceived mineral of like wet rocks. In these wines, although you saw those big oak barrels, those barrels could be 100 years old. There's no flavor given to the wine like we've experienced in other tastings where we get caramel and vanilla and the baking spices of cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. These are old neutral barrels that are fermentation vessels as well as aging vessels to allow a little bit of aeration into the wine to help bring some of the flavors out before bottling. These wines traditionally are, maybe 6 to 9 months, the longest in these barrels before the wines get bottled. So lots of freshness, and it's the concentration of flavor of the fruit, along with the acidity, which of course acid is natural preservative and is what gives these wines great longevity. I should note that at the turn of the century, from the 19th to the 20th, in the late 1800s, the most sought after and most expensive white wines in the world were dry Rieslings from Germany. Burgundy wines were still recognized, obviously, but they had to compete with the fame of the great dry Rieslings. Go through a couple of world wars, and Germany got beat up, and when their wine industry started coming back, they took the path of least resistance of pioneering, or of just starting back with easy drinking and sweet wines, because as we all know, spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. And so that's what Germany became famous for, their sweet wines. But now that the industry is back, the vineyards are well reestablished, and so many of us clamor for the noble dry wines from the great vineyards. That is coming back, and so for this tasting, maybe another tasting, we'll taste some dry and sweet to see the differences. But if we, I described it on the nose, but I haven't yet, have I? No. Let me sneak a peek at my tech sheet. Is it any techier? Nah. It's just a bunch of hooey. Telling the varietals that Julia Spittel grows. Of course, as you see, Silvaner is the highest percentage of what they produce. Riesling, Scheurebe. Oh, I love Scheurebe too. Scheurebe is the product of cross-pollination by Georg Scheu, who did this cross-pollination with Riesling, and I forget the Riesling. Well, you know what? Don't get me started. These guys, you would think they would take notes or stop guessing of what they use to cross-pollinate. What? Oh, I have two questions. Well, let me just. Okay, yeah, good. And what's the question?
Richard Handel.
Richard Handel is asking a question.
Why does it taste like there's some minor carbonation in the rice?
Ooh. Well, because, why do we sense a little bit of carbonation? Really, it's due to the acidity of the wine. They may have, because they certainly did not bottle this wine at the end of fermentation. So the wine was able to sit in barrel and let all that carbon dioxide blow off. Sometimes they will put a splash of carbon dioxide, CO2, into the bottle well, that's actually what they do. All of the bottles get flushed with CO2, and then the wine goes into it. So we've gotten all of the oxygen out of the bottle so that, we don't have air in the bottle that's going to oxidize the wine. And so some of that CO2 is trapped in the bottle when it's sealed. Did you notice that all three of these wines are screw cap? Really, we don't need cork anymore, but of course there's so much romance with cork. But truly, screw cap technology has gotten to the point where the screw cap can work just as well as cork to age wines long term. Another conversation for another time. So it's really just the preservation of the acidity, maybe a little blast of CO2 at bottling, and that certainly kind of blows off and in your glass. And certainly, you know, while this wine isn't going to last long because it's delicious and you're going to drink it down and it'll just be a memory. Let me just remind myself. Thank you, Richard, for that question. Next question is?
It's from Devani Wolfus.
Oh, yes.
Do they reuse the barrels casks?
Devani Wolfus.
Julius Spital.
Do the what?
It said, do they reuse the barrel in casks for the wine at Julius Spital?
Yes, every year, you know, every year the wine that fermented and aged briefly in those barrels that wine gets bottled, they clean out the barrels, and then in time for the next harvest of wine to go into those barrels for fermentation and aging. Obviously, they have enough barrels that for wines that need to age longer, you know, they have a surplus of barrels, those cavernous, that cavernous cellar. So yes, those barrels will be reused for 100 years. Okay, so Silvana. So what, dry wine, actually a little more tart on the nose, on the palate than what the nose led you to believe, right? When I put my nose in the glass, I was getting lots of sweet fruit aromas, ripeness. And then you taste the wine and it's drier than what you would have thought, and more accentuation of acidity. And I would say a little earthier. I'll tell you that, and maybe you experienced this yourself when you first poured the wine into the glass. I got scent of sulfur from the sulfur dioxide that's also put into the wines prior to bottling. Sulfur is also an antioxidant. It prevents the wine from turning brown. The sulfur molecules, it's SO2, and SO2 in the wine is searching for oxygen molecules. And when the SO2 grabs the oxygen molecule, it becomes SO3. And by bonding with that oxygen, it prevents the wine from oxidizing. So, and especially with screw cap, we can sometimes, it kind of concentrates the aromas. That too blows off. But I'm not getting the sulfur now, but I am getting kind of a little bit of an earthiness, maybe even a slight subtle mushroom complexity in this wine. I don't know that I would quite say vegetal, but where am I going with this? So going back to our visit to Germany, and when Wendy and I were in Germany, we were lamenting because most of our trips to Europe have always been over like the Easter holiday. And when you go to Europe in Easter holiday, you don't really expect a lot of vegetables. And going to Germany, I figured we were going to have a lot of meat and sausage and potato, but we were so lucky, and we were like, oh, we were in heaven because we were there just in time for white asparagus season, Spargel. And every village, every stop, we had Spargelsuppe. We had white asparagus soup everywhere. And so this past white asparagus season, Wendy made white asparagus soup, Spargelsuppe. And we ate some, but she froze some. And she said, oh, I forgot we have this white asparagus soup. I'm going to defrost it. We're going to have that with this Silvana. It's going to be wonderful. We're also going to have what are we gonna? Well, you know, Wendy's a Midwestern girl. She's from Marion, Indiana, and you know they used to love these pork tenderloin sandwiches, which is basically pork schnitzel. You know, and they pound the pork loin, and it's this big outside of the bread, and you know, so we're gonna have some pork schnitzel with dinner, and she's gonna surprise me because she didn't tell me everything she's making tonight. So I'm so pleased because these wines are gonna go wonderfully. So Riesling with shellfish, I mean, always lobster, crab, scallops, fatty fish, whether it be salmon, chili bass, is wonderful with sausages. The white meats of pork and veal are really what Riesling, dry Rieslings are wonderful with. Even some off-dry, depending on the sauces or the things that are going to accompany your dish. And when we get into the sweeter Rieslings, where we start getting, you know, sweet peach and apricot and honeyed, even sometimes in a ripe Riesling, even when it's fermented dry, we can get the perception of honey on the nose of the wine. And yeah, so yeah. So I don't know. I'm losing track of myself here. So let's move on. Can we look at the next slide? Yeah, come on, slide me. So there's Stein Vineyard. Bye-bye, Stein. Well, back to this map, because now, as I said, we started in the Mosel, we went to Franken, and now we're in the Rheingau. And so if you look at the river, you can see the curl of the Main River going through Franken, and then it comes up and it leads. You can see it says Rheingau and Wiesbaden and Mainz, and the village of Mainz is right there where the Main River feeds into the Rhine. The Main in the Rhine. The next picture is the Guild of Sommelier map, where so down in the lower corner you can see the village, that corner block where it says Hochheim, and Hochheim sitting there on the Main. And you can see that's right where the Main leads into the Rhine River. And I took this picture from the next one from Google Maps, of course, where now there it is, Hochheim on Main, and where it leads in, and there's Mainz, and then the river is going to flow to the west, and then it curves north, and there you see the red dot of Osmanshausen, and that's the village where we're going to be tasting wine from a single vineyard, the Höllenberg vineyard. And actually, we can even go to the next slide that'll come in. Now, I kind of twisted the map so we're not really looking fully north, because I twisted it around so you could see this little valley that leads down to the river. And just at that hill right there is, and I'm not sure exactly where it is. I think it's on top of the second road, I think it's the second road where the Höllenberg vineyard is. So that vineyard is facing south. And that's where we have this Spätburgunder that we're going to taste. Okay, we can leave the maps. Bye, map. Bye. And so Spätburgunder, of course, Pinot Noir, the most planted black grape of Germany. Why? Because Pinot Noir is a thin-skinned black grape that doesn't do well in hot climates. It prefers the cooler climates, and certainly that's what Germany is all about. Honestly, a little further up the Rhine, we will come to the Ahr Valley, AHR, the Ahr. And that's also because the Ahr is the tributary to the Rhine up there. And the Ahr Valley, which is even further north of where we are now, I'm pretty sure the most planted grape there is Spätburgunder, Pinot Noir. And so Ahr Valley Pinots, but the village of Osmundshausen in particular has become famous for their Pinot Noir. And so let's put a nose here. And, you know, I swear I get sort of a Burgundian, chalky, where's my cheat sheet here? Again, is there any more tech? Nah, damn tech. Allgäuer, Riesling, at least they're giving you a little of the process, but I was looking at soils. I don't know. You read it, you'll get it. I get the sense of, I get a sense of chalk, although it's probably the decomposed slate that is common to this area here. But so kind of riper cranberry and strawberry and red cherry, maybe a hint of raspberry. And maybe cherry blossom, rose, could be. Mineral. I don't really sense, did they say the oak stain? I don't think so. I think this is from neutral barrels, because I don't really pick up on the nose any kind of barrique sense. This is really all about fruit and earth. It's a very pure Pinot Noir. Again, acid. Wine is dry. The wine is translucent. My description of this would be a translucent ruby in the center, going to an orangey pink rim, thin watery meniscus, really just kind of a medium viscosity, low to near no staining of the glass because it's very, very light in color. And yeah, actually, as I swirl and kind of get the alcohol volatilizing to carry that scent to my nose, I'm even getting maybe hints of mushroom. Pinot Noir and mushroom. Pinot Noir can have a lot of mushroom, and that's why makes sense to have Pinot with dishes that have mushrooms, or I could do just a kind of a grilled portobello mushroom. Yeah, I meant to ask. I meant to ask Chef Andreas for a dish that I could recommend, but I've been telling you about what Wendy's making for dinner tonight. So we're gonna put Andreas on the spot one of these days, and maybe he'll do this with me, and we can talk food and wine and just wax on, wax off. Like just a hint of chalky dryness on my teeth from the tannin. I would say, this is low tannin. medium plus to high acid, not high like off-putting, but the acidity is there to cleanse. This is all fruit and earth. Okay, it's question time.
I'm asked for you to repeat the questions.
Oh, yes, repeat the question.
Is the Sylvania?
Well, who's asking this question?
I'm sorry, Karen Gallagher.
Karen Gallagher. Thank you, Karen.
Is the Sylvania as versatile as the Riesling with foods? Repeat the question.
I'm pondering the question. Is Zilvaner as what's the word?
Versatile.
Versatile, right? Versatile. Words drop out. Is Zilvaner as versatile with food as Riesling? Well, no. I think Riesling has it. I think the slightly higher acidity of the Riesling and the way it holds residual sugars as a result of that high acid is what's partially giving Riesling a leg up on Zilvaner. Although I was at another winery, although Julius Spittel I know makes it, but I was at the Rudy May winery in Franken. It was actually our first stop, and had a wonderful tasting there with Rudy May. And I came home with one of his Botrytis Zilvaners that was just, out of this world. I still haven't drunk it. It's just in my wine cellar, and I'm waiting for a special opportunity to break it out. I think dry white wines with sufficient acidity do have their own versatility with food. But I think, maybe it's just I'm biased because I love Riesling. So there's the truth. I'm biased. Who else?
Wendy Lindsay.
Wendy Lindsay.
Riesling pairings comment on Asian food, curries.
Oh, well, right. So when we talk about curry, right? Why are the sweet Rieslings ideal with curries, whether it be an Indian curry or a Thai curry? And the answer is kind of twofold. Sweet Rieslings, and so now we're talking about Riesling Spätlese and Riesling Auslese, and then we get into the Eiswein and Beerenauslese, or Trockenbeerenauslese. Oh my goodness. Anyway, when we talk about the sweet wines, and I'll only go to the Spätlese and Auslese, which are the sweet wines that haven't quite reached dessert wine sweetness. These wines are going to be anywhere from 7 to 9% alcohol, very low alcohol. And the reason we want low alcohol is because when you have a hot, spicy dish that curry is, high alcohol wine, alcohol exaggerates flavors. So if we have a high alcohol wine with a hot, spicy dish, it's like throwing fuel on the fire, and you're making the wine, you're making the spice hotter. So low alcohol in wine, which is what the sweet Rieslings have, will not exacerbate the heat, and the sugar coats the mouth to further protect from the heat of the dish. Now, what did I say? One of the first things I said, when we have sweetness in a dish, we want sweetness in the wine to balance it. Since Thai curries not only have the heat, but also have the sweetness often from coconut milk, the sweetness equals the sweetness of the wine, balances the sweetness of the Thai curry. And so then we have a total love packaging there. Yeah. So that's where the sweetness really comes in, is with hot spice and sweet. Next question.
Richard Handel, so it's a two-part question.
Richard Handel's back with two-part question.
All right, he's asking, what are the German wines that are good for long-term aging? And
What are the German wines that are good for long-term aging?
And is it true that Riesling is the best for pairing with Chinese food?
Yeah, well, I mean, Riesling's, there's another German grape that is called Gewürztraminer. Yeah, actually, some of the best Gewürztraminers actually come from Alsace, France. Remember the tasting I had today. Alsace being just the other side of the Rhine from France. They've really been a champion of Gewürztraminer. Gewürztraminer is said to have a spicy flavor, and the florals. Because if we think about Chinese food that is going to have a lot of ginger and garlic, big aromas, big flavors, food and wine pairing dictates that the food not overwhelm the wine, and equally the wine not overwhelm the food. So if you're having something with rich aromas and flavors, you need something rich and aromatic. Riesling is not a highly floral, but it is a floral grape that has that a lot of that jasmine spice to it, and aromatic that works wonderfully with Chinese food, as well as Gewürztraminer is another grape that I recommend with Chinese. What was the second part of the question? It's that short-term memory. That sieve-like.
Is it true that Riesling is the best pairing with Chinese food?
Is Riesling Riesling and Gewürztraminer? Like I say, I think Riesling is the most versatile of white wines. So I think Riesling is great with Chinese, but it's not the only game in town. Practically. Next question.
This is from Heinz Yagi. At what temperatures should all of these wines be enjoyed?
Oh, Heinz Yagi is asking about the temperature that we drink these wines. Well, by and large, your wine cellar should be at 52 degrees. The range for ideal storage temperature is 52 to 56. I always recommend that you keep your refrigerator at the low end at 52 degrees. 52 degrees is going to give your wines the longest potential life. And for those very, very ageable wines, they will outlive you, and then your children will benefit from you having stored your wines at 52 degrees. At 52 degrees, these wines are ready to drink if your personal palate prefers them a little cooler to 50 or just under 48, 50 degrees. So be it. If they're at 52, 5 minutes in an ice bucket, and they're going to be there and already getting too cold. So why do we not want them too cold? What does that mean, too cold? Well, you know how we swirl the wine in the glass? What did I say? The alcohol volatilizes and carries the aromas to your nose. The colder the wine, the slower the alcohol evaporates. And so the slower you get the full aroma of the wine. We don't want our white wines too cold. We don't want our red wines too warm, because then the alcohol overtakes it and the wine can seem out of balance. So I don't really think any red wine should be drunk above 65 degrees. So this Spätburgunder, our Pinot Noir, is 55, somewhere between 55 and 60 degrees. This wine is fine. So we take it out of our 52 degree temperature. You pour it in the glass. in a few minutes, it's going to be there. You don't need to warm it up. This wine is just in the ideal temperature. And although, you know, full-bodied wines are said to be best at 65 degrees, you know, if there's a lot of alcohol in those I mean, that's what defines a full-bodied wine, besides, you know, the high tannin of a full-bodied wine is the high alcohol. Alcohol defines full body. If that wine is 14% alcohol or above, we are in, you know, full body wine. And you know, I like to have them be a little cooler so that the alcohol doesn't overtake it. What do we got?
We have a question.
Yes.
Neil Selman.
Neil, hey Neil, I'm sorry that you didn't like one of last week's wines. I'll double up the next time. So Neil Selman is asking a question.
Yes, he is. Do the Germans really call Pinot Noir Pinot Noir? Was there a German phrase?
Well, Pinot Noir is the international name. Do Germans? Repeat the question, please. Would you please repeat the question?
Do the Germans really call?
Do the Germans really call Pinot Noir Pinot Noir? No. The Germans call Pinot Noir Spätburgunder or Blauburgunder, the black Riesling, the black Burgundy, or Spät. Where's Johannes? Didn't I see Johannes? Johannes was here. I forget what Spät translates to. But anyway, Spätburgunder is German for Pinot Noir, as is Blauburgunder, the black Burgunder. Grau, with a Grau Burgunder, is the gray Burgunder, and that's Pinot Gris. And then the Weiss Burgunder is the white Burgunder for Pinot Blanc. Question?
We do. This one is from Lauren Danielak.
Lauren who?
Danielak.
Lauren Danielak is asking,
would these wines be considered natural wines with no additional sugars used in the fermentation process?
Excellent question. I got to repeat the question.
You do, yes.
Well, so the question is, if I remember it, can this be considered a natural wine with no additional sugars added? Lauren, I'm not sure I really know what a natural wine is. In the United States, a wine cannot be considered a natural wine if any sulfur dioxide has been added. That's really where the definition of natural wine comes from. In Europe, they can call it a natural wine if the sulfur dioxide addition is below 6 parts per million or something like that. Again, I made up the number, but you know, you can look that up. Of course, we're talking about, you know, if we want to talk about natural, are these organic? I believe all of these producers here are organic or biodynamic, which implies no chemical additions of anything. In Europe, and specifically in Germany, because of the cold climate, sometimes the grapes will not have produced enough sugar on their own to make sufficient alcohol. And I may have said this in a previous tasting, but I'm going to, well, you know, I just love the sound of my voice, so I'm going to repeat myself. Why is it that wine is made from grapes? You know, if we have a wine that's not made from grapes, then the wine will be defined as a blackberry wine, a plum wine, But if it just is wine, it's made from grapes. And why is that? Because grapes produce more sugar by volume than any other fruit. And we need that higher sugar concentration to make sure that the wine has sufficient alcohol. Why do we need sufficient alcohol? Because, as I said, alcohol increases the aromatic expression of the wine. If we have a dry wine and all we're going to get to is 6% alcohol, the wine, texturally, the wine is going to be very thin. There's not going to be much aromatic coming. The grapes provide the sufficient sugar to create that alcohol. If some seasons are cool, then in Europe, they're allowed to add sugar. Just beet sugar can be added to create more alcohol. And so it's possible that these wines will have had sugar added. But my guess is, especially in this day and age and the way things are, and what they've learned in growing grapes and in pruning. The other thing I didn't mention is that these great vineyards that have these great aspects with south-facing slopes, they already have a leg up. And then the final act is the act of man and woman to prune the vine, to limit the amount of fruit that the vine can produce, so that all the nutrient brought up from the vine and the leaves producing sugar will create enough sugar in the grapes that they shouldn't need to add any sugar. That when they're harvesting those grapes are being harvested at the right time of balance of acid, sugar, and flavor being has shown itself. So forgive me for being so long-winded, but so that's what these wines are. These are high quality wines that more than likely did not need any added sugar. That's the best I can give you.
Juliet Harani has two questions.
Juliet Harani.
What is your favorite Chenin Blanc?
Juliet is asking, what is my favorite Chenin Blanc? Well, there is there's no single answer for that, but, I'm going to hedge a little bit, but there is a producer along the Loire Valley. What's that? I'm blanking his first name. But the last name is Joli, Joli. And he produces some fully biodynamic Chenin Blanc wines that are some of the great and again long-lived wines. But we're Chenin Blanc outside of our tasting today. I promise that we will come back to Chenin and give it its due. Besides the tasting that we're going to do, where we're going to taste our last tasting in 2 weeks of this set is South African wines, and Chenin Blanc is the workhorse grape of South Africa, making all the varied styles of wine. Again, a very versatile grape variety, Chenin Blanc, and another one of my loves. One more, or
Yeah, one more.
One more.
How long can you lay a German white wine?
Who's asking how long can we lay down a German white wine? And who's asking that?
Juliet.
Oh, Juliet again. Juliet, if we're talking about some of the great Rieslings, sweet or dry, actually the sweet dessert wines are good forever, and may not think so when you open it up and pour that wine, that white wine into your glass that now has become a brown wine, but it is still going to be good and delicious. Some of those sweet Trockenbier and Auslesen Riesling wines. So if you get those great Rieslings, or, you know, I would say the Würzburger Stein, which is from a Grand Cru vineyard in Franken, but this is probably a 20-year-old wine. Whereas the great Rieslings, this is just a village wine. If we had Reichsgraf von Kesselstadt, Josefshofer Riesling, that wine could be good for 50 or more years, and I'm talking about a dry Riesling. So as I say, I call that long-lived. Okay, kids, I think I have to go home for my Spargelsuppe. Thank you again. You know how much fun this is for me. I think Sasha's already pushing me for what are we going to do next. I think we're going to go back to the varietals. Caitlin and I ordered some Ridge Vineyards Doozy Ranch Zinfandel that tasting got canceled. But I think we're going to buy more of that if we can. And so I think I want to do a Zinfandel tasting. I want to do a Syrah and Rhone blend tasting. And I'll come up with a couple more to follow that. So stay tuned. I'm already thinking about what we're going to do next. There won't be a month's break in between, unless holidays or I don't know what's going to be in the way. Maybe I shouldn't make that comment about maybe we shouldn't have had this tasting tonight for various reasons, but never mind why. We did it. I enjoyed it. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I'll see you next Monday. And last one to the bottom of the bottle's a rotten egg. Good night.